The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is an honor to have this opportunity during these difficult times to put in context 13 of a longer list of initiatives by the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources. We are unable in this presentation to unpack the entire emergency plan of action, but will, over the course of the next few weeks, lay out the complete plan. Mr. Speaker, the global COVID-19 pandemic has claimed thousands of lives and unleashed a tremendous amount of fear internationally. There's been substantial contraction in the global economy. Losses are clearly in the trillions across the globe, and the Bahamas, like many small island developing states, has been hit hard. Our hospitality industry, Mr. Speaker, which accounts for approximately 40% of our GDP and much more indirectly, has virtually, for the moment, been shut down. What is clear is that over the course of just several weeks, more than 10,000 persons in that particular sector are now working shorter days or not at all. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, more sectors throughout our national economy have experienced devastating losses. Our country, Mr. Speaker, is in a peculiar and very dangerous position given the fact that 90% of what we consume in general, but what we consume in particular in terms of food, agriculture products, come from overseas. There is significant uncertainty relative to the timeline when countries will be in a position to reopen their economies and when citizens can resume their pre-COVID lives. What is clear is that the longer this pandemic continues to exact its toll on countries around the world, international trade will continue to contract. And food supply chains, while not challenged in the Bahamas, are likely to see disruption. So, Mr. Speaker, we have been tasked to come up with an emergency action plan that is already in train. And very briefly, I wish to signal to the farming community, as we will on next week outline a detailed proposal relative to the fisheries sector. I wish to propose several key actions being taken. Firstly, following the leadership of the Prime Minister, we have commenced consultation with various importers who the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources have built relationships with over many decades to determine the level of their food stock. We are satisfied that for the short to medium term, supply chains continue to operate effectively, and we caution the public against panicking over the availability of food stocks. The Ministry of Agriculture is also, in a very deliberate way, consulting with farmers and agriculture suppliers throughout the family of islands and have developed an instrument in consultation with other stakeholders to determine what we have in production in the fields with livestock up until July of this year. We are collecting that important data, using it in conjunction with the data received from importers to determine what our food stocks are. This evaluation is important as we have already begun to determine what is likely to be the demand for food across the Bahamas over the course of the next 4 to 5 months. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have produced a plan that has been driven by the food drum concept devised by the Ministry of Health. And the goal of this plan is to strengthen food security, to ensure that there are adequate supplies of food, as mentioned before, but equally, if not more important, to make sure the right kind of food is available. Mr. Speaker, aside from what has been mentioned before in terms of trying to make sure that in the event of a disruption in international food delivery, we believe an additional objective is important, and this plan speaks to it. We need to diversify the economy of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and if nothing in our history has underscored this point, COVID-19 clearly does. The Emergency Food Plan, Mr. Speaker, is an attempt to ensure that we can increase production, not in all food groups, but to target those groups where there is a reasonable opportunity for import substitution. In other words, where we have a reasonable chance of producing in adequate amounts, cost effectively, those fruits, vegetables, value-added foods, and livestock that we can produce here in the Bahamas that we are presently importing from overseas. Mr. Speaker, we have conducted a study in conjunction with the Food and Agriculture Organization, most recently with the IDB, with assistance from CADI and IECA, and we are clear on what those food items are that we have an opportunity in terms of import substitution. Mr. Speaker, the food drum produced by Ministry of Health is a very useful tool, and it has identified 7 main groups that I listed in last week's presentation. Mr. Speaker, please note that in order to accelerate food production, the focus needs to be on 1, strengthening the production systems of existing farmers through the provision of inputs, seeds, to some extent, guaranteed food prices. Thirdly, that the government, where it purchases food, must earmark funds to purchase those foods locally. The provision of feed for our livestock throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, strengthening the production system on all of our islands, but in particular, those islands that have already demonstrated the ability over time to produce the various foods identified in the food groups. Among them will no doubt be Andros, Abaco, Grand Bahama, Ket Island, Exuma, Eleuthera. Nevertheless, the evaluation by our technical team have looked at other islands not identified in this short list, and they too will in fact be assisted in strengthening their production capacity. Mr. Speaker, the second part of this initiative is to provide hydroponic systems and shade houses, and where possible greenhouses, to a range of producers, including young farmers and backyard gardeners. The hydroponic method is supremely efficient, Mr. Speaker. The use of water in hydroponic systems, when compared to traditional farming, creates a high level of efficiency. With the use of shade and greenhouses, 1 acre under such technology produces 10 acres equivalent of traditional farming methods. Mr. Speaker, the third part of this plan is to establish layer production units that target egg producers throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas so that we can provide this source of protein. Fourthly, we intend to reestablish the backyard gardening program. And of course, the fifth initiative is to ensure that we strengthen the food technology and food safety lab and increase our capacity to engage in not only cottage industry, but large-scale food processing to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the excess that is being produced, as they are now being produced in a number of crops, will in fact be converted to jams, jelly, tomato paste, peppers, and of course, other value-added products. Mr. Speaker, it is also our intention as a part of this plan to strengthen the feed mill ahead of our intention to privatize this feed mill through a public-private partnership. Mr. Speaker, we have already spent the monies in order to order feed, and now the Ministry of Agriculture is augmenting that original order so that we can have extra feed to ship to various family islands in order to store for use by those islands when needed. Mr. Speaker, in order to address the possibility of reduced imports, we see it as an urgent need for all of these orders to be completed over the course of the next 14 days. Toward this end, we have already begun the purchases. We are in the process, Mr. Speaker, of purchasing 343 hydroponic systems at a cost of $343,000, 10,000 backyard gardening kits at a cost of $240,000, and the intensification of the production of roots, tubers, vegetables, legumes, fruits, and eggs at a cost of $376,217. This total spend just for this one component of the program is $1,626,939. $39 million. Mr. Speaker, our third initiative is providing land clearing and preparation for farmland throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We are utilizing, Mr. Speaker, the $1 million facility that we have obtained through IDB to concentrate on post-Dorian agriculture work to assist Abaco and Grand Bahama. We have, beyond this $1 million, additional funds to assist all of the other family islands, and this week we will collaborate with the Ministry of Transport through the island administrators and have those funds sent and to be accounted for in a very transparent manner. We will be assisting in the first instance on the island of Grand Bahama, 19 farmers, and in Abaco, 40 farmers, all identified, quotes obtained. Mr. Speaker, the fourth component of our emergency plan is the increased provision of farm inputs. More than $400,000 is being allocated to assist with purchasing seeds, pro-mix, livestock, which have already begun to be shipped to farmers, animal feed, fertilizers, and other inputs. Our goal is to build the capacity of family island farmers and, of course, to deliver valuable knowledge and technical assistance using ICTs. The cell phone has become extremely important in communicating important messages to our small farmers throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we will be reposting online this week the complete backyard gardening, the backyard farming guide. You would recall that we had posted it several months ago in conjunction with a live. We are now in the process of upgrading and reposting it because of this new revitalized effort to promote over-the-hill farming as launched by the Prime Minister, and of course backyard farming throughout our family of islands. Our fifth program, Mr. Speaker, we are executing repairs on 3 packing houses in this budget cycle as a matter of urgency, and will repair the remainder in the next budget cycle. 6, we're identifying storage facilities nationwide. Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest constraints in terms of meeting farmers' needs on a timely basis is getting the products to them using the present mailboat system. By shipping in advance and storing, we will address this issue. And in the process, we are fixing the cold chain issue, that is, the cold chain problems that we have now at the packing houses, on some mailboats, and of course, once the produce arrives in New Providence, is a critical part of our solution, and therefore we are now pricing those equipment that we need in order to fix the cold chain system that poses a problem for farmers throughout the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, number 7, we are also working closely with transport and the mail boat operators in order to address the issue of how do we reduce damages of products traveling into island, how do we ensure timely operations so that products can get to market when we promise wholesalers and end users. 6, we are strengthening our statistical capacity as well, Mr. Speaker. Wholesalers who we are asking to reduce their import of items that we can produce locally want to know when products are going to be available months in advance. And therefore, the statistics is to help us to establish predictability. As I wrap up, Mr. Speaker, I wish to mention 2 very important things that will be released this week. 1, the frequently asked questions of the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources. That will be posted tomorrow for the general public on social media and otherwise. Our distribution system would also be made available to those farmers who have asked, how will the hydroponics systems, how will the backyard kits, how will the poultry layers be distributed? That will also be released. In addition, we intend to outline how we will distribute the seeds that we have sourced from different family islands, purchased from CADI, and items that have been purchased from the Fish and Farm store. We wish to also advise that the task force on food security will in fact be established this week. And of course, this is a follow-up to the conference call with different stakeholders over the course of the last week. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we intend to strengthen the incentive regime that we have in place that will assist farmers with logistical issues in moving their products to market, strengthening market connectivity, ensuring that there is storage, making sure that the SPS system, sanitary and phytosanitary considerations are dealt with, that we guard against price gouging, and of course, that we ensure that government facilities purchase locally. And so, again, to the fishers, we wish to extend our gratitude to our colleagues for supporting the continuation of subsistence fishers, not more than 2 persons in a vessel, and only vessels of the size that can obey social distancing, and of course, of commercial fishers. We are also working closely with national security to ensure that no divers are on vessels that are not originally from the Commonwealth, that are not from the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In other words, non-Bahamian divers are not permitted on Bahamian vessels. Foreigners who are in the Bahamas now or in the future will not be able to have his counts and shall be dealt with if they exceed the catch limit. I wish to say to the residents of Marco City, we have been receiving your calls and messages and have been working with our colleagues to resolve those emergency issues that you have been addressing. And I encourage all Bahamians and residents of the Bahamas, let us summons our spirit of national unity. Let us work across all divides, especially the political and religious divide. Let us forge a collective will to tackle those things that afflict us. COVID-19 is but one of them. Communicable diseases, poverty, crime, non-communicable diseases are others. We are a creative people, a resilient people, and we have bounced back from hurricanes and recessions before, and by the grace of God, we can do it again. We have a connection with an almighty, compassionate, and wise God who cares about us and is responsive to our cries. And so in the midst of scarcity, I encourage you to still let us be our brothers and sisters keepers and to keep the faith. Mr. Speaker.